Pamela Bob, your host, and I'm here with the wonderful Dean Butler and Allison Arngrim. How are you guys?
Good.
Fabulous.
Good.
I'm so happy to be here with you.
Well, I'm so excited your camera's working.
Well, don't speak too soon.
Okay. Yeah. So, it's been, when you're thinking about when I'm thinking about doing this program that we're all going to be doing together, and Pam, we are so excited that you are a part of this to help be the traffic cop for all of this.
Amongst
yeah, I mean, but it's unbelievable what's going on in Little House world right now. Here we are. We have just, we've just kicked into the 50th anniversary year, and our event in Simi Valley is just in an intense level of pre-production right now to get it all ready. And
bananas.
Yeah, it's
so exciting seeing it on social media. The steps.
Yeah. No, it's
like
really been.
The church is up.
Yeah, well, the church is painted. We installed at the in December before the end of the year. We installed the bank facade at Big Sky with a
Mr. Sprague's place.
Yeah, so yeah, and we have to do some adjustment to the way that the bank is installed because there is a concern. It's so interesting how the insurance issues at Big Sky are pretty dramatic. Well, these things are 15 feet high and about 12 to 15 feet wide, and they are held in place by these steel jacks that are like these triangulated things. They're for sets. It's like a set. Yeah. And then we put in guide wires because the wind up there can be like 70 miles an hour blowing through there at times. So we put these guide wires up, but the ranch came back to us and said, we have to eliminate the guide wires because we have people who trespass in here all the time. And there's going to be someone on a motorcycle that's going to speed by this thing and get hung up. And even though they're trespassing, they'll sue us if it happens, which is just sort of outrageous. But so we have to change the way we install.
Okay, even if someone's you don't want to just clothesline a guy because he rode his bike through. That we did, obviously.
No, of course we don't want to do that.
Also, wildlife. There's wild animals still out there, and I have visions of foxes and coyotes eating the wires.
But I think the most important question is: are you going to blow it all up when the event?
We will absolutely not be doing that.
Oh, good.
No.
Yeah, we will not be doing
bring
that.
them back up for the 60th anniversary.
Yeah, there you go.
Darn tootin'. No, that only happens once in a lifetime. Thank heavens. No, we're not blowing it up. This is the set that will never be blown up. Thank God.
Yeah, no, exactly. It may peel after a time. It may get a little rotten if the wind.
We'll fix them.
But we can fix it.
We'll fix them.
But yeah, I mean, I just think fans are going to, when they see in person, and people have seen photographs that Olin de la Paz, who's painting these things, he's a very gifted set painter and any kind of painting. This guy is incredible. But when you see it for real in person, it's like it suddenly looks three-dimensional. It's like, okay, if you step behind it, it's not. But as you're looking right at it, these things are amazing.
I've seen like the church and the bank. They go, okay, I know. When the mercantile goes up or the hotel goes, I'm going to go. I've held it in, but I'm going to see the mercantile lose it.
I am fully prepared to run down the hill with airplane hoses. Oh God, you can't.
Yeah,
stop
no,
me
I think we're going to have to be restricting that because that's another insurance issue.
Oh God,
no,
we'll do it after hours private.
Okay, well that's let's not have anyone from
Girl,
the
you're going to sign a waiver. She's going to need to sign a waiver.
Yeah, well, everyone is insured when they're there. So if anyone trips on we're not going to be installing any flowers with wires on the hill that people can trip on. If they trip, it's going to be because they trip on a gopher hole or on a stick or they, something.
Well,
but yeah.
People come at your own risk. You heard it here.
Yeah.
Things.
Exactly.
And we're not going to push anyone down a hill into the pond. Just not. Just not even me.
As we start this process, and this is just our second episode of doing this. One of the things that I think is fascinating to us is the origin story behind Little House.
Absolutely. And with that, I will start to introduce our very special guest today. I'm not going to say his name quite yet.
Yeah, please don't say his name yet.
Okay, what I will say is from the studios of UBN Go in Burbank, California, this is the Little House 50 for 50 podcast.
I love that music.
I mean, that is the most beautiful. I can't. The music, forget it. We'll have a whole episode on the music.
We will actually.
No, we will be doing that. We will be doing that. But, I'm just kidding. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go on.
No, you go ahead, because I have a tendency to want to jump in. So you're the wrangler.
He'll talk all day.
I will
and
take
so
that
will
torch
I.
and run with it. Well, during these early episodes of our podcast, we're going to explore the early origins of Little House. And Dean and Allison, what did you know about Little House before you started starring in the show?
Clueless. Absolutely nothing. Nothing. I had not read the books. I know. I was a deprived child. I did not read the Little House books. And I had no idea that there was a Nellie Olson or what a Nellie Olson was. I didn't know. That's why when I read for the parts of Laura and Mary, and I was like, I think I'd read for something on the Waltons. It was like all that kind of stuff.
That's just so wrong.
That was so bad. That would be so bad. Horrible. So, it was the search for Scarlett O'Hara for 9-year-olds. They saw everybody. So they thank God they make the pilot with the two girls. And I'm like, well, that's done. Like, they hired these two people and they got the job, and it's great. And thank God it's not me, because I would be so wrong. And I go on with my life. And then months later, it's okay, now it's time to do the show. So they got to cast the 10. Now they got to go get Miss Beadle and Doc Baker and and Nellie Olson. And so unbeknownst to me, they're getting Richard and Catherine. All this is happening. And then I'm told, come down to Paramount and read. And I'm like, read for what? And I did that. I have no clue. And I get there and I get the page. Like I said, clueless. Did not read the books. Did not hear. Did not do Nellie who. Nothing. And they didn't even say you're reading for the bad girl. Nothing. Cold. Read ice cold here. And I, of course, jaded 12-year-old, I start reading it. And that's when I turned to my father, who had been through 8 million auditions by this time with me. And I said, this is not a normal part. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, this girl's a total, I guess I can say it on our podcast. I said, this girl's a total bitch. My father said, excuse me, what? And I said, well, I read it for him. And he started laughing hysterically because it was my home thing. He said, okay, I don't want you to rehearse it again. I want you to do it just like that. I don't want you to think about it. He said, put the pages face down. I didn't even want you to look at them. Don't look at them. You go and you do it exactly like that. I went, okay. And I did. And well, Kent and Michael and Tripp, they were all there, and they lost their tiny little minds laughing.
Of course they did, because there wasn't a single other person on the entire planet that could have done it.
I was cast. They asked me to do my home speech again because they wanted to see if it was humanly possible. They went, just think about the house again. And then I was cast on the spot. I had the job. I got home, and the agent was on the phone. Wardrobe fitting is Tuesday. It was over.
Wow.
But I still had no idea. Oh wow, I'm the villain. Wait, what's happening? Who are these people? What?
And then did you read?
Yes, immediately went out and got the books and was excited to see that the drawing of Nellie Olson in Town Party Country Party completely looked like me. And I was like, okay, that's spooky and weird and creepy because the drawing completely looks like me. It's like upturned nose thing. I was like, that's weird. And so then I read them and went, oh, okay, I see. I get it. Oh, yeah, far out. And we were off to the races.
And Dean, what about you?
Yeah, and I had, like Allison, I had absolutely zero knowledge of Little House before seeing it on television. I'd never heard of the books. I didn't know they existed. I knew nothing about Laura Ingalls Wilder. I knew nothing about any of it. Families have different things that they read, and we read the Rudyard Kipling Just So stories, and we read, we read, my grandfather read the Mother West Wind stories to us, and he read the Goops to us, and he read,
Your family was fancy.
Good stuff.
These kinds of things. It was not just, Little House was not part of my growing up experience. So when I started seeing it on television, this was 5 years before I was ever a part of it. When I started seeing it on television, I thought, well, this is obviously not designed for me. I'm thinking this. I'm not the target audience.
I'm not the target audience. I'm not the target audience.
At 20.
Little did you know.
Yeah, no, right, exactly. But Monday nights,
come on.
Yeah, Monday nights I'm watching ABC at 6:00 on the West Coast for a football game, and there was no way in the second half I was going to be flipping around the television to watch Little House. And then I was off in college, and it was the same story. I wasn't watching anything on television at 8:00 at night during my college years. So it really came as Little House came as this incredible surprise. And when after I actually got the show, I always remember this when I went to Michael and said, are there things that you advise me to read to really be in sync with what you're doing? And anybody who knew Michael will get this when I tell you that he just looked at me stone cold in the face. He said, the only thing you need to read is what I write. Period. And if you read what I write and do what I write, everything's going to be fine.
Wow.
So, so again, I didn't really seriously invest in the Little House books until after we were done.
But
I get what he was saying. I get what he was saying because
of course.
He knew he'd already caught in flack for it. Well, you've kind of diverged from the books in her life. Yes. Well, we have certainly by that point when you came in. So he's like, okay, if you can read the books if you want, it may be confusing at this point because.
Or he just didn't want him to argue with him and say, actually.
Oh, in the book on page 12. Oh, God. Right? It's like we've gone so far afield. This is the story we're doing now.
Right. No,
so don't muddy the water. Just read the thing.
Fantasy. Yeah.
So,
for sure.
So now I think we want to go. I'm really interested to go back and let's go back and look at from the perspective of our guest, who is incredibly knowledgeable. And Pam, why don't you quickly introduce our guest today, who can talk to us about the origins of Little House and all kinds of connections to this that he has.
Yes, our wonderful guest today is Chris Czajka.
And who is Chris Czajka?
Who is Chris Czajka?
Yeah.
Chris Czajka, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, Chris.
Sure.
Hi, Chris. We all know him. We all know him.
Who are you? Hi,
happy anniversary. It's really such a pleasure and such an honor for me to be here and to be talking on this really momentous occasion. My name is Chris Czajka. I am quite literally almost a lifelong Little House fan. I have kind of a really deep and scary knowledge of Laura Ingalls Wilder and the Little House books, which is a really fun party trick, but it's also informed my professional life kind of through my adult life. I've had the ability to kind of work on Little House related projects. My day job is that I work for the PBS station in New York City, WNET.
Channel 13 for all
Channel 13 for all you New Yorkers. Early in my career at WNET, I was a historical consultant for the PBS series Frontier House, which was
love that.
Little House meets Survivor.
I would watch it.
I just need to interrupt for a second because if
Frontier House.
If our podcast listeners do not know about Frontier House, you have got to watch this series.
They'll be jealous.
Is it streamable on PBS now, Chris?
Can you get it?
It is. If you are a member of your local PBS station, you can access it on Passport.
Yes.
Yeah, so I got to be a historical consultant on that, literally because when they were starting to prepare the series, my boss at the time, said to the production team, she said, there's this lunatic who works in my department who knows everything there is to know about westward expansion and homesteading because of the Little House books. So I worked on that show. I was actually the Laura Ingalls Wilder historical consultant for Little House on the Prairie, the musical, which toured the country back in 2009 and 2010.
Right.
So that was a lot of fun.
I had a few friends in that production.
Yeah.
Did you?
All about it.
She's a Broadway girl. She sure did.
Sure. Who are I'm sorry, just Pam, quickly. Who are your friends?
Kevin Massey is a friend of mine.
Love
I
Kevin.
knew Jessica. I knew
Al Manzo.
Kevin was wonderful on the show. He really was. Yeah. He was great.
Wonderful guy. Shout out to Kevin Massey.
And then the big one is I was a producer, and it was actually, I presented the idea that eventually became the American Masters documentary, Laura Ingalls Wilder, Prairie to Page, which premiered on PBS back in December of 2020.
Yay.
So, Laura, starting in childhood, I wanted to learn everything I could about Laura Ingalls Wilder and Little House. But I am of the breed, and there are many of us out there who can appreciate both the books and the TV series in equal measure. I go both ways.
So,
both ways.
Yeah. So
I am a hybrid.
So is that how it started for you then? I mean, in school, reading the books. Take us back to that beginning for you.
The very beginning was when I was in first grade. There was an excerpt from Little House in the Big Woods in my reading textbook.
Yes.
And it was the Two Big Bears Two Big Bears chapter of Little House in the Big Woods, when Laura and Ma go out to feed the cow and Ma inadvertently slaps a bear.
Ma slaps a bear. It's a great story. The Ma slaps a bear story in Big Woods. I love the Ma slaps a bear story.
So that was in
Ma
first
really
grade
slapped a
She
bear?
didn't mean to.
Yeah, they went
She
out
didn't
and-
know it was a
Ma-
bear.
I know I've
It
read
was
this.
dark.
I just don't remember the specifics of Ma slapping the bear. That's a gutsy thing to do.
It could have been a great episode. If
We should have done it.
just brought in Gentle Ben. But that chapter was my first exposure, and I thought that was an interesting story and a lot of fun. But then when I was in second grade, my second grade teacher pulled a couple of us out and gave us a special reading assignment to read one of the Little House books in its entirety. And I read Little Town and the Prairie. And apparently I was a dense child because I did not make the connection yet between the Little House books and this thing that was on television called Little House on the Prairie.
So I'm sorry. So Chris, how old are you?
Right now?
Yeah, right now.
I am 52.
A mere child.
So I was a wee child.
Yeah, right.
My family went on vacation, and we were staying with friends of my mother's. And the daughter of that family was watching Little House. And I remember exactly what episode it was. It was To Live in Fear. Mary gets kicked in the stomach by the horse. And then chaos ensues.
Yes.
And as I was watching that series, I was like, wait a minute. Charles, Caroline, Mary, Laura. Like, suddenly I was like, oh, this is those books. So from that moment on, and that was again when I was February of second grade, I started watching the series and then, watched it. And at that point, back in the day, it was on several times a day, including on primetime. So, there was a period of time, when I was in fourth, fifth, sixth grade, where if one chose to, one could watch Little House, 3 times during the afternoon, and then you could watch it still in prime time.
It was awesome.
So
you wouldn't have possibly been someone that watched
I
it 3
couldn't have been
times
doing
and
that.
then prime time.
Right.
So Chris, so how was it for you? Because here you've read the book. Suddenly, these character names, you're connecting with these character names, but they're not necessarily doing what they did in the book. How did you deal with that, or was just this is another aspect of all this? But what did you think?
As I had read all the books, I read all the books very, very quickly and rapidly, and then started rereading them. And the TV show always existed as a companion thing.
Good.
It was very clear that it was like, this is inspired by, this is adjacent to, but this is not necessarily a faithful adaptation. And I think by that point, I was savvy enough that I knew that sometimes when people made movies or TV shows out of books, they change things. So
sometimes you break a rib and have to take off your shirt.
Exactly.
That's what it is.
But see, this is a much more healthy attitude, because we hear from people who are like war, the book people and the show people who are just ready to strangle each other over the show. It's not like the books, and the books aren't like the show. The show's more exciting. And they fight about this. People fight about this. But that makes sense, really, to say, well, the books are the books and the show's the show. It's like, I don't know, I guess it's like Star Wars. You have the games and you have the comic books and you have the show and you have the cartoon, and it's all canon.
You look at something like The Wizard of Oz. The Wizard of Oz, the novel, is extremely different from the very, very, very popular film.
Read it on Facebook. Yes, it's completely different than the movie. Wizard of Oz is completely different than the movie. Totally.
Yeah. And let's face it, we go on TV to see Michael Landon with the broken rib. Yeah, no, we're not getting that from the book.
Pam, you continually come back to that. I sense a little bit of obsession over the physicality of Mr. Landon.
He looked
it's so
really
funny,
good, man.
As a child, I recognized how beautiful he was in every aspect, emotionally beautiful as well as physically beautiful. Yeah. But he was my pa as a kid. Wow. So it never sort of crossed the line. But as an adult watching the shows, it's like, dear God, the man knew exactly what he was doing. He knew he needed to break a rib, right? Because the viewers were watching. And again, the TV people versus the book people. I mean, I'm a little scared to say this, but I'm the TV person. I'm much more the TV person than the book person. And part of that is because there's the books are so gentle. And I think that in the TV show, the core quality is that gentleness, right? But it's television. It has to be entertainment of some sort. So there has to be a heightened something for us to want to tune in every day. If it was just pie making for an hour, we wouldn't be tuning in.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
So I know I'm zoning in on Michael Landon being shirtless, and it's just to prove the point of, there's that sort of heightened, maybe not realism that a TV show would have as opposed to the books would have.
Well, and I remember reading an interview with Michael after I was in second grade, where he said, I can't film, 9 pages of Caroline Ingalls baking a cake.
Yeah.
And you can't film 9 pages of someone building a door.
Right.
Those are the sorts of things that are in the books. But we can talk more about books versus TV.
Well, I think it'd be fun to just, you mentioned Prairie to Page and that you carried this idea in. So what this came out of, you've read the books as a child, you've watched the series from coverage. Now you've done Frontier House. I guess at that point, you've also done the musical. You've been involved in the musical at that point.
You're way in.
So you're all the way in. So now take us to that thought.
What was the trigger event?
Yes.
I can tell you exactly what the trigger event was. In 2018, someone, Allison and Dean, that Mr. William Anderson.
Yes.
He published a book, or there was a book published called The Selected Letters of Laura Ingalls Wilder.
Yes.
Which is a great book, really provides a lot of insight into Laura and Rose. But in that book, when it was published in 2018, there was a line where Bill Anderson said, essentially, this is it. There are no more words left to print. Everything that Laura Ingalls Wilder created that would be of interest to her readers is now out there in the world. That was around the same time that Laura's previously unpublished memoir, Pioneer Girl, was being published. And that was the moment where I was kind of like, okay, the memoir is coming out. There's nothing left to print. It now makes sense for us to think about producing a documentary. So I went off to the producers of American Masters, the biography series on PBS. And the first conversation I had with them, I gave them a list of statistics. I did not tell them who I was proposing we should do a film about. I just, it was statistics like, these books have been in publication for 80 years. There was a television show based on the books that's been on the air nonstop for whatever it was at that point, 45 years. Just all of these statistics related to the longevity and the popularity of Little House. And the producers read those statistics and they were like, oh my gosh, who is this? And I said, Laura Ingalls Wilder. And they were like, oh, well, we should totally make this film.
Yes.
So then began the PBS process of raising the money to produce the film and getting the film pulled together. And it was quite a process, which was made. We had our own Little House style trials and travails because when we were halfway through filming, the pandemic hit. Wow. So libraries shut down, museums shut down, archives shut down. We couldn't go film people in person anymore. Yeah, right. So we sort of had to navigate all that while we were completing the film. And thankfully, I am not by trade a documentary filmmaker, but I was working with this very, very accomplished filmmaker, Mary Murphy, who was our writer and director, and she sort of wrangled us all, and we went through the hardships of producing a film with the world shut down.
Yeah, and all in your own homes.
Very well received and very popular. I'm sorry, what was that?
I was going to say, and you were all, I am assuming, in your own homes. You weren't even together. We were in our own homes. We had done a lot of the location shooting earlier. I think I interviewed Allison and Dean in the back room of the church in Walnut Grove.
Walnut Grove, that's
in
right.
2019.
Right.
But then we ended up doing crazy things like, directing a drone operator on FaceTime while the drone operator was flying a drone down Plum Creek in Minnesota. So it was definitely a very interesting production process.
The fact that you could even get an internet signal to do a FaceTime call at Plum Creek in Walnut Grove, Minnesota is the most amazing part of that story.
Yeah, right.
I don't know how you even get a signal there. I mean, you are in Walnut Grove. For those who haven't been there, you are out in the middle of nowhere.
It's pretty, but wilderness. Well, and where Plum Creek is, they have a field that they've wildflowers that would have grown there in the 1800s in Laura's time. I mean, it is the whole wilderness thing, preservation deal.
I was just revisiting the documentary last night, knowing that we were going to be talking today. And I mean, I loved it so much when it came out. And it also, by the way, came out during the pandemic, didn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. And it was such a comfort. It was such a comfort to see that documentary.
Yeah. Well, and Laura had a renaissance, as they say, during the pandemic. Yeah. I mean, it was uncanny while we were in production on the film. Just during lockdown, how there was just this nonstop cadence of references to the books and the TV series. And, if they could get through this, that we can get through this. So it was very well timed, despite it being, a global disaster.
Well, I was reading the books live. I went back because I said, well, I'm stuck at home and everything I'm doing is canceled. And I said, I'll go back and read the books. And then I said, well, everybody else is stuck at home too. Hey. And so I said, hi, are you all bored? Great. Here, I'm going to read Little House in the Big Woods, page 1, chapter 1. And I read all the books, and people went
whole thing
nuts twice.
So
twice
for 2 years.
People were talking endlessly on the news, on talk shows. Little House on the Prairie, this, back when they had to grind their own wheat. We had an episode called Plague and an episode called Quarantine. It's hello.
Even Snoop Dogg was posting about
Snoop Dogg. Snoop Dogg is in the Little House on the Prairie now.
So the second week of the pandemic, Good Morning America said, what books should you read while you're sitting at home bored? And one of the books they mentioned was The Long Winter by Laura Ingalls Wilder.
Fantastic.
So
simultaneously, I released my series Living on a Prairie during the pandemic too, and that ended up being just this sort of comforting weekly group gathering of Little House, Living on a Prairie, then the documentary, then Allison reading, then Dean would come on and do a special read.
You were my best guest reader. You were my best guest reader because some people were intimidated and said, I got to tape it. No, you went live. You went live with Long Winter.
So, no, and Pam, of course, that's where we met you.
Yeah.
Through Living on a Prairie. Allison and I, Chris, met you in that library. I mean, we talked to you on the phone, but we put face to face with you in that back room in the church in Walnut Grove.
Pa's bell is ringing in the steeple.
So now I have a question for Chris, because okay, so you're so in deep between dealing with the musical, of people's fascination for the show. So when you were doing the Frontier House or the 1800 Survivor, we were calling, and I would watch that show, and of course I said I would laugh because I got to go home at the end of the day and was getting paid, and these people voluntarily put it. So the people who came to that show and said, yes, I'd like to sign off, and I'd like to spend, they spend weeks, months in that thing?
They spent the a long summer.
A whole summer.
Wasn't it 3 months?
Living in 1800s conditions. I'm going to wear the clothes. I'm going to take away my makeup, my deodorant, all my favorite things.
One of the couples got married.
Yeah, no TV, no radio, no nothing. I'm going to do this thing. How many would you say, from what you know, did it because they were somehow weirdly fascinated by the TV show Little House on the Prairie, and this set them off?
Well, there's a very brief snippet where actually the woman who got married, you see her after they've gotten married, you see her running down the hill doing bird wings. So there was definitely, there was some influence there, I think. But the thing that I always, when that show was originally on, and social media was in, there were internet chat boards where people were talking about shows, and people were like, I could do this. I could do this better than these people are doing it. I could go live under those circumstances. And the thing that I always come back to is the people who actually tried to do it during the actual time period.
Yeah.
Half of them failed.
They couldn't do it. The actual people couldn't do it.
Going out west in the 1870s, 1880s, and trying to succeed at doing that, half the people who tried to do it did not succeed. They went home. People don't really. Homesteaders went home. Difficult.
Yeah.
People who went out west, if they didn't die tragically, they went home. People went back east, said this is a terrible idea, and got back in the wagon.
If they've survived it, which is why Frontier House is such a perfect companion to Little House on the Prairie, whether it's the TV show or the books, because it puts that history into actual perspective, right? It's one thing we can read about in the book, we can see it on the series, but until you're actually seeing these people and what it actually entails and how difficult it, my God, just chopping enough wood to last you
it's constant
through the winter.
Doing hay twists in the long winter to keep from, your hands, what's happening to your hands doing these hay twists?
It was not a pleasant life. Yes, there was calico and butter churns, but it was also like, I got to keep working really, really hard so I don't starve to death.
Yeah, it was all day long was, how do I not freeze to death? How do I not starve to death? That was pretty much it the whole day.
So let me ask a quick question. We've got it because we are pushing on the clock here.
Yeah.
Chris, before we take one quick little break and move on to our next segment, does Laura get her, in your estimation, and you're in a good position to answer this, does Laura get her creative due in the world?
Yeah, the one thing that she definitely has is brand recognition. People who have never read the Little House books, people who only vaguely know who Laura Ingalls Wilder is. You say Little House on the Prairie, and most people have some sort of, mental association and image of what that means. Target comes out with a line of calico dresses, and immediately everyone's like, oh, they're Little House on the Prairie dresses. So it's sort of come into the popular consciousness. I think Laura, as a writer and an American author, something that's interesting is if you think about writers like Louisa May Alcott or Mark Twain, they have been sort of studied by scholars and critics for decades and decades and decades and decades. Laura Ingalls Wilder scholarship and criticism, while it sort of started in the 70s, it really kicked into high gear in the mid 90s. So it wasn't until the mid 90s that she sort of became, scrutinized as an important American writer. I think there's been a stigma about children's literature. But I think it wasn't until, in the grand scheme of things, relatively recently, that she started to be looked at and examined as an important American writer, not just because of the quality of the fiction that she wrote, but because of the historical story that she was telling.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much for that, Chris. Let's take a quick little break and we'll be right back. So, Chris, let's get this out of the way. If you had to name 5 episodes of the series that you really like, what speaks to you?
What,
remember,
would you like 20?
you're sitting in front of Allison and Dean right now, so make it count, Chris.
Would you like 20 or 30?
I'd love 20 or 30, and I think if you'll come back 2 or 3 more times, we can go through all of them. But right now, let's talk about 3 or 4 that you really like.
We're going to do buckets because I was thinking about there's one of the things that I really loved about the series, both in its original broadcast and in its many, many, many reruns, was that you never knew what you were going to get from week to week.
That's true.
You could get broad comedy. You could get gothic horror. You could get melodrama, romance. So I kind of have to, parse out in my head the different types of episodes.
Yeah, and sometimes that music introducing the show, you think, oh, this is going to be a happy episode. And the next thing you know, someone is drowned.
Yeah.
And they're being kidnapped.
Oh, David Rose, what a clever man.
I mean, I think it is so funny that with non-fans, there is this perception of it's this sweet saccharine show, and it's like, oh no.
Yeah.
Terrible things were happening all the time.
I told Allison and Dean, during the holidays, the Hallmark Channel did a marathon 24/7 leading up to Christmas. It was all day, all night, whenever you wanted, turn on the TV, see Little House. And I was like, this is fantastic. And then after a while, I said to them, I need a mental health break. This is very intense.
Yeah.
So,
So,
all right. So, no, because we got to let Chris get this in.
Which are the episodes? Which are the
Here's my
episodes? Because it's true. It's true.
Number
You don't know
one,
what you're gonna get.
the pilot, just because,
Yes.
it, first of all, it hews really closely to the books.
Yes.
Which is
It did.
great.
It did.
But it also was just so exciting to see, obviously this was when the characters really came to life.
It's beautiful.
And it's just, there are so many pieces of the pilot that are gorgeous and so well done.
Gorgeous, beautifully
The Christmas
done.
scene with Mr. Edwards is
Beautiful.
great. There's that moment early on where Michael Landon climbs into the wagon and says, Kansas, here we come. And the music swells and the wagon pulls away. And it is a great film. And it is so true to the heart of the Little House books that one always has a very special place in my heart.
Yeah.
Then we get to, if we think of buckets, I have to say, I know a lot of people really love Bunny, and I really love Bunny, but I'm going to propose another favorite kind of Nelly Evil episode. The music box.
Yes. Yes.
I don't think.
Thank you.
As far as pure, unadulterated Nelly Evil.
Yes.
Now, I refer to this episode as the episode where even I hate me. Because I'm really just unpleasant. It's not nice.
I mean, let's make the stuttering girl do a tongue twister. That is a certain level of nastiness. But then also the dream sequences are
hanging. We have a hanging. There's a hanging.
Yeah, there's an executioner. There's the executioner's hood with the peppermint stick sticking
cane.
out. Yeah,
brilliant.
so that for comic appeal and just the Laura Nelly rivalry music box is in that bucket.
Thank you.
Have to say one of my favorite episodes, always and forever, and I'm counting this as one, even though it's two, is Back to School. Because it just, I literally remember flying off the sofa at my parents' house when I realized, oh my gosh, Eliza Jane and Almanzo, and I credit you guys for me saying Almanzo. Not
Listen, my theory is for TV, it's Almanzo. For the books, it's Almanzo.
Yeah,
And that's my
Almanzo.
rule, and I'm going to stick with it.
Yeah.
But Back to School, I mean, how can you not love it? You've got, a mud fight. You've got the restaurant opening. You have got Catherine McGregor, who I swear, watching her is an acting masterclass.
Yes,
I mean, she was just so good, and particularly that episode. So
it's a majestic.
It's a majestic. That episode is just so much fun to work, and it was such a oh my gosh, how are they going to get from point A to point B?
And suddenly, and
Eliza Jane is
he
here.
is a ribbon. He has a ribbon. The man has a ribbon.
And things are going in a big new direction.
Right.
Yeah. Then there's sort of the natural disaster bucket, or against nature bucket, and I've got tied for 2 there. Blizzard, Miss Beadle sending the kids home on Christmas Eve.
Poor Miss
Some of them make it, some of them don't.
Yeah.
That is a lot of fun. Well, not fun, but it's a lot. It's compelling television.
It's a good story.
It's a great episode.
But as far as fun disasters, the camp out, falling into the river and going down the rapids during the week.
Almost actually drowning.
Inadvertently caused a lot of drama.
And then it ends with poison ivy and ha ha ha, wah wah wah,
right.
goofy music.
Let's laugh at everyone having poison ivy. Skin
But
infections.
I feel like a lot of episodes, no matter what the travesty that happened, someone died of the plague, but the last scene is always, we're going to be great again.
Right.
So,
and then last but not least, I would say, the tornado episode, the Days of Sunshine, Days of Shadow,
Beautiful.
which is oddly,
episode.
and that's one of the other things that's interesting is when the writers would randomly pull out these things that Laura Ingalls Wilder had written that weren't in the Little House books, like Days
real
of Sunshine,
things.
Days of Shadow is what she termed the early years of her marriage.
Right.
And while the episode is not, 100% historically accurate, it does a really good job of showing, just what they were up against. And a lot of it is true. And a lot of what they had to overcome is presented, spiritually faithfully to what actually happened to Laura Ingalls Wilder.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. That's very nice. We'll be right back. And you need to hit just... Oh, so it'll be
so much
old Dan
fun.
Tucker?
This is so
Those
much
are
fun.
excellent
I can't
choices.
Stand it.
Thank you.
Excellent choices.
So we are...
We wrapping up now?
We are racing for the finish here. We are on a very short clock. So I'm just going to say, Chris, would you come back?
Please.
Oh,
at some point during our 50 for 50?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because this is too
problem.
good.
And I just also want to say, because the two of you are here, we are so excited that both of you are going to be in Simi Valley in March for the Little House of the Prairie 50th Anniversary Cast Reunion and Festival. You are both going to bring something so special to this. We are very excited. So for those of you listening to this, Chris and Pam are going to be sort of the ringmasters in the Little House Town Square tent, where we are going to be doing presentations and panels about all things Little House, and they will be leading different. Now, they don't know which panels they're leading yet, but it's going to be a surprise for all of us, but you're going to be great. I know you are. And
they know their stuff.
Yeah. And if you want to know more, if you're listening and you want to know more about our event, you can go to littlehousefestival.com and check that out. And I want to make sure before we say goodbye that our audience knows that our program is being brought to you in part by Visit Simi Valley in the city of Simi Valley. They have been incredible. This is a Herculean thing that they are doing to create this event for fans of Little House. There are people coming from 4 continents that will be traveling to Simi Valley. It's going to be a very, very exciting time. And I think we're there. I mean, we'll be back with more on another week with you, Chris, but I'm just jumping in here, Pam. We got to say goodbye.
Oh,
okay.
I had too much fun.
I hate saying goodbye. This goes by so quickly, but thank you everyone so much for joining us today. Chris, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
You should see our text messages about how excited we are about this Simi Valley event. It's insane. And we'll see you in March, everybody.
Well, you see, yes, in Fist, but you're going to see, but you will be here next time.
Yep.
Next time.
Thank you guys so much.
And